Hi, I've been putting together an algorithmic-based percussion case, and one module I wanted to make sure I had in it was a probability skipper, something like the Ladik S-090. This module basically says, yeah, you're going to send me a gate, but how often do you want me to actually pass that gate on to the output and to the sound module I'm supposed to trigger? That comes in particularly handy when playing with percussion. Right now I have pattern 1 of my Euclidean circles driving an SSF entity percussion synthesizer that's in the right channel. And I have pattern number 2, the 3-beat, driving an Erica pico drums, and that's in your left channel. Let's go ahead and pull out these straight beats and start from scratch using the Ladik probability skipper. The first thing I'm going to do is patch the top pattern into the input on skipper number 1, and then take its gate output to the trigger in on the SSF. With the probability set to 100%, initially it sounds just like patching directly from the circles into the entity. But as I start to back off on the probability, beats start getting skipped. Now the S-090 happens to have a couple jumpers on the back to change how it functions, and I brought them out to the front panel using a Shankwork Pequeño Interruptor, a little switch. One of the options is the pattern of the skips. Are they clustered together? Like here you're hearing long spaces of silence, followed by long strings of beats, or are they more random? This setting. I have my probability set pretty high, 80%. We'll go down to 50, and it should be pretty random between the two halves. The in LED blinks when there is a gate coming in, but nothing going out. The out LED blinks when it's passing along a gate. Now there are two independent halves to the S-090, so I can go ahead and plug my second pattern into the lower skipper section and take its out and patch that back into the pico drums like I had before. It's at 100% right now, that's why it's getting every beat, but I could also have it randomly skipping beats. Now initially that just sounds chaotic, but with certain combinations of settings you can get some really interesting patterns. For example, I'm going to turn both of these back up to 100%, so passing along all other beats. And I'm going to change the jumper for the pattern of triggers back to grouped together. When I leave it at its top setting, which means totally random, sometimes it'll skip beats even at 100%. Okay, you hear right now that both of these sections are operating totally independent from each other. However, jumper number 1 on the S-090 allows me to set up an exclusive mode, saying if we're sending an output from number 1, mute the output from number 2. That means on the downbeat, where they're both supposed to hit, we'll go ahead and hold off on triggering that second beat. That adds more clarity to the pattern by not having both of the kick drums hit at the same time. But what's even more interesting is that input number 1 is normal to both skippers 1 and 2. So when I pull out the input for skipper number 2, now this probability is deciding, do I get sent to output number 1 or output number 2? Right now I have output number 2 set to 100%, so it says if I get a trigger, pass it along, and I'll back off the skipper for output number 1. Now you hear that it's trading off between the two halves. And again, I can change the pattern to be random beats as opposed to grouped together. That's more of a random pattern, but occasionally we'll skip a beat altogether. This is grouped together beats. You hear there's more constant strings going to one side and then the other. And I'm going to pull pattern 2's output since we're not going to be using that anymore. Now something else that probability is a lot of fun for is playing around with hi-hat patterns. So I'm going to take pattern number 3 on my Euclidean circles, run that to the input on skipper number 2, and instead run it over to a hi-hat sound. So what's going on right now is these very fast notes are being passed at 100% probability to the plonk, but whenever my kick drum hits, it's doing a holdout on that hi-hat pattern. Let's go ahead and turn probability up to 100% so we get every kick. Now if I was to turn off this holdout pattern, or the exclusivity mode, now we're getting every single hi-hat beat. It's not being held out by the kick drum. Exclusive mode. Independent mode. Now I have a separate probability on the hi-hat pattern, and I can go ahead and just dial back how often those hi-hats hit. Now we start getting some interesting patterns. And again, I can go ahead and use exclusive mode. Get a little bit more clarity to the pattern. The hi-hat is being held out whenever the kick hits. We'll go ahead and let them play independently and therefore hit the same beat if they want to. And I can play some games like saying we only want occasional kicks. Maybe give it a very long decay. A bit more probability. And back up to 100%. So I found a skipper like the S-090 has been a very nice addition to this cabinet. Not only can I go ahead and have interesting hi-hat patterns with variety to them, I can dial in the density of the beats. I can also take advantage of exclusive mode. Let one pattern drive both inputs, and then go ahead and switch between two different drum sounds. I'll put the probability up to 100% so the second one hits all the time. And maybe even say, let's play primarily the second one and just have the first one come in occasionally. If you're into algorithmic type patterns or you just like random events, I definitely recommend adding a skipper to your cabinet.